Those of you who know me, or at least have listened to some of my messages, will have known long since that I grew up watching MASH. This is hardly a surprise since the show has been on TV continuously for over 50 years now, ever since it premiered in September of 1972. They even started syndicating the earliest seasons of it before the show finished its original run on the last day of February in 1983. The Andy Griffith Show has been on even longer. It's never gone off the air since, the early 60s? And if you are new to this state and you have never watched it, at least catch one, because they'll revoke your North Carolina credentials otherwise. Joyce enjoyed MASH as well. She even told me that she had written some fan fiction, either a short story or maybe even a few stories set at the 4077th. Joyce's fanfic featured an original character of her own creation, a Major Thompson, who was a female British surgeon remanded to the MASH unit for a time. Now that's a fan. Joyce especially enjoyed the episodes which featured either Edward Winter as Colonel Flagg or Alan Arbus as Major Sidney Friedman. You remember Sidney Friedman. He was the Army psychologist who first turns up in an attempt to determine whether Corporal Klinger is actually crazy or is just trying to get out of the service. Now, the two things about Colonel Flagg are that, number one, he's so hyper-patriotic as to be jingoistic, and number two, he's really stupid.
He's really nuts.
He's more stupid than Frank Burns is, portrayed by Larry Linville, who, by the way, is my mother's sixth cousin. In fact, Colonel Flagg is so stupid that he doesn't realize just how stupid he is. And the thing about Sidney Friedman is that he's a wise man, a compassionate man, and a respectful man. For instance, Sidney originally describes Father Mulcahy as having absolutely no training. But before all is said and done, he realizes that Mulcahy has just been trained in a different discipline from his. Now, there's an episode of MASH from season 9 called Bless You, Hawkeye. You might remember it. Hawkeye develops this mysterious fit of constant sneezing, which progresses to include hives, if I remember correctly. After the other members of the medical staff, plus Klinger and Father Mulcahy, try their home remedies on Hawkeye, and they eliminate all the medical explanations for his condition, Colonel Potter sends for Sidney Friedman to find out what Hawkeye's got on his mind. At the end of their initial session, Hawkeye asks Sidney if he knows what has caused all the sneezing. Sidney replies, "No, but I think you do. And you'll tell yourself when you're ready." Sidney Friedman had just articulated a principle which has been known to every fortune teller in the world since time began. People who ask questions in the first place are looking for answers. And people who are looking for answers generally already know, at least on a subconscious level, what answer they want to find. That's why oracular devices like tarot cards and rune stones work as well as they do. Or take something I've done myself occasionally. Draw a vertical line down a sheet of paper, right down the middle, when you have a decision to make. Put a plus sign at the top of one side where you list all the positive aspects of the situation, and put a minus sign at the top of the other side and list all the negative aspects. Pros on one side, cons on the other. It'll soon become apparent what you really want to do, because you'll list a lot more reasons to do something if you already want to do it, or you'll list a lot more reasons in the other direction if you really don't want to do it. Keep all of that in mind as we read this morning's scripture, which comes from the 24th chapter of Luke, verses 13 to 35, because we'll come back to it. This is, of course, the road to Emmaus, and please keep your groans to a dull roar. Yeah, I know we've all heard messages about the road to Emmaus before, but this is a bit different. And behold, two of them went that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 80 furlongs, which is about 7 or 8 miles. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. And it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden that they should not know him. And he said unto them, What manner of communications are these that ye have one to another, as ye walk and are sad? And the one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answering said unto him, Art thou only a stranger in Jerusalem, and hast not known the things which are come to pass there in these days? And he, Jesus, said unto them, What things? And they said unto him, Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and have crucified him. But we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And besides all this, today is the 3rd day since these things were done. Yea, and certain women also of our company made us astonished, which were early at the sepulchre. And when they found not his body, they came, saying they had seen a vision of angels, which said that he was alive. And certain of them which were with us went to the sepulchre, and found it even so as the women had said, but him they saw not. Then he said unto them, O fools, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things, and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. And they drew nigh unto the village whither they went. And he made as though he would have gone further. But they constrained him, saying, Abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent. And he went in to tarry with them. And it came to pass, as he sat at meat with them, he took bread, and blessed it, and brake, and gave to them. And their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished out of their sight. And they said one to another, Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the scriptures? And they rose up the same hour, and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 gathered together, and them that were with them, saying, The Lord is risen indeed, and hath appeared to Simon. And they told what things were done in the way, and how he was known of them in breaking of bread. So Cleopas and his unnamed companion are traveling to the village of Emmaus, about 7 miles outside Jerusalem, which seems to be where they live, apparently and significantly in the same house. On their way, they're joined by a stranger who asks what they've been talking about. Cleopas and companion describe all the strange goings-on in Jerusalem for the benefit of the mysterious stranger, whom they don't recognize as the risen Jesus. And then they tell him what they'd hoped for, what they had expected from Jesus before the crucifixion. They had hoped that Jesus was the Messiah and that he would redeem Israel, free their country from Roman control. But none of that had happened. Instead, Jesus had been crucified and hastily entombed, and the women who had gone back to the tomb to finish the burial just as soon as the Sabbath was over had found it empty. These women had even reported seeing a vision of angels who told them that Jesus was alive, and Cleopas and his companion didn't know what to make of it all. Then, after listening to their new fellow traveler give his take on the story they had told him, they arrive home and prevail upon the stranger to accept their hospitality. I recently posted a quiz on Facebook asking why the Road to Emmaus story specifically mentions Jesus being invited by Cleopas and the unnamed disciple to break bread with them. Why that specific expression? Why break bread? Beulah, do you know?
No, but I'm having a different thought about
Okay.
here.
Judith?
Well, I'm thinking of companion.
No, it's breaking the bread.
Right, I understand. I'm
Yeah.
thinking a different way.
Yeah, I'll get to the companion in a second.
Is it, David, that the crust is hard and you have to actually break it?
You're getting warmer,
Yeah.
but you're not there yet.
Okay.
Tell us.
All right. In all the years that I've been asking people this question, and I first thought of this just before I graduated from Guilford College, which tells you how long ago it was, very few people have given me exactly the right answer, which turns out to be pretty simple. Jesus breaks bread in this story because it's still in the middle of Passover, and all these people are Jewish.
Matzah.
It's matzah. Yeah, all these people are Jewish, including Jesus. So the bread they were eating was the matzah you have to eat during Passover if you're an observant Jew. The reason that Christians rarely answer my question correctly is probably that we routinely think of these people as Christians, not as Jews. We have metaphorically scrubbed all the Jewishness off of all of these people, except for Caiaphas and the other priests. The only people whom we're accustomed to thinking of as Jews in the Gospels are the bad guys in the story of the crucifixion. Tell me I'm wrong. You can't, because you know I'm right. We do the same thing to the unnamed traveling companion of Cleopas in this story. What do I mean? The unnamed disciple who accompanied Cleopas down the road to Emmaus was probably his wife. I wish I could take credit for this idea, but I can't. Isaac Phillips, who was my pastor at Kernersville Friends during my college days, suggested this either in a Sunday message or a Bible study, and I think he was right. Anybody who knows anything at all about genealogy can tell you this. If you're putting together your family tree and you don't know the name of one of the parents, who is the person whose name you are much more likely not to have? The mother, the wife, the woman. If the other unnamed disciple on the road to Emmaus is actually Cleopas' wife, it explains why they're apparently living in the same house and sharing meals, as well as the extent of their knowledge of the situation, particularly if ancient church tradition is correct and Cleopas' wife was a member of Jesus' family. Or take another example. In the Samson story in the book of Judges, we know the name of his father, Manoah. But Samson's mother, who is one of my favorite people in the entire Bible, because she keeps her head and is so wonderfully practical when her husband is convinced that they're both going to die because they've just seen God, is known simply as Manoah's wife. She asks the very pertinent question of why God would want to kill them right after telling them that they're going to have a baby. That's why she's one of my favorites. That wonderfully practical and pragmatic side to her. If you ignore the important characteristics of a person, you delegitimize that person. The danger is that you start thinking of them as less than human, certainly as less than you. And once you do that, all sorts of bad treatment become permissible. Just ask Jewish people in this country who lost relatives in the Holocaust. Just ask the people of Gaza or Ukraine. Just ask black people or women in this country. Just ask the Native Americans. I could go on, but I'll stop with this. The same thing is happening right now in this country. It's happening to immigrants, especially Hispanic ones, and they're not the only ones. And it isn't right no matter who it's happening to. Here's a perfect example of what I mean. Instead of celebrating Children's Day later in the year, which is the custom in this country, that Hispanic majority church to which our meeting recently sent a letter of support has, for the past few years, chosen to recognize the Sunday closest to the 30th of April, the date of the Mexican observance, as El Dia del Niño. They hold a celebration. Last year, they had either officers from the city police department or sheriff's deputies there as a demonstration that the police are trustworthy in this country. And they had a big party with balloons and everything. The pastor of the church wanted to do the same thing again this year. But they decided against it because in the current climate, the presence of the police would scare all the kids away. Not to mention their parents. In so many of their original home countries, the police are seen as the agents of governmental oppression, which coincidentally brings us back to the idea of people's expectations. It takes time and much effort to unlearn reactions and patterns of behavior which were initially established over a great many years, or to trust people whom you've learned to mistrust. People become hypersensitized to negative stimuli, and that can make relating to each other difficult. We've certainly seen that in this country over the past 30 years or more, as many expressions which quite a number of people used to use in all innocence, and some admittedly were not so innocent, but these expressions have been met with objections from other members of our society who see the terms in quite a different light. The Mendenhall home place down in Jamestown, which was a shining example of the non-slave-owning South and is reputed to have been a stop on the Underground Railroad, used to be called the Mendenhall Plantation until around 10 years ago or so, if memory serves. Similarly, the smallest state in the Union voted to change its full and official name in the 2020 election from the State of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, which had been its name since independence, and it was the colony of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations before that, to the much shorter and more politically correct, or perhaps politically palatable, State of Rhode Island, because some people can't help it that they immediately think of slavery when they hear the word plantation, although the term originally just meant a settlement. In my own life, it took my mother and me quite some time to recalibrate the basis of our relationship after I graduated from college. I remember one time in particular when my mother came in to tell me that my father was either going or had gone to get us pizza for dinner. When I asked what toppings were on it, she told me that it had everything except little black fishies, which we all hate. Thinking nothing of it, I said, "Oh, garbage pizza," because that was the admittedly somewhat slangy expression for it that I'd picked up. In case you haven't ever encountered that particular term, The way it was explained to me was that it was called a garbage pizza because they dumped everything on it. And I said it in all innocence, without even thinking about it. But from the reaction I got, you would have thought that I had insulted the quality of the pizza and by extension my parents' taste in deciding to purchase one in the first place. We were so hypersensitized toward and mistrustful of each other by that point that what would ordinarily have been an easily bridged example of the generation gap, and which would have provoked smiles, if not chuckles, after the explanation, turned into a major argument. And I'm not going to hold either one of us solely responsible for that situation. We'd both gotten us there. Thank goodness we've put most of that behind us now after the passage of time and with a considerable amount of effort. Although we still have the occasional touchy moment, well, just like most people do. There's a line in the old Blues Traveler song, Run Around, which ties in quite nicely with all of this. As we seek, so shall we find. The thing is, we don't always recognize it when we do find it, at least at first. Cleopas and his wife certainly didn't. Or we can get off track and start seeing everything as a challenge, as an accusation, as a confirmation of our worst fears or experiences. We human beings are especially prone to this sort of confirmation bias, which happens far too often with heartbreaking or even catastrophic results. Yet I firmly believe that with our faith, or if you prefer that wonderful turn of phrase from the traditional Quaker wedding vows, with divine assistance or with the aid of divine providence, we can rise above our own confirmation bias, no matter how firmly entrenched it is. So be it. Amen.